Well, the Champions League knockouts have been set. So I thought it'd be a good time for us to explore the ties and the fixtures just a little bit further, to go through what you can see here on the screen as what is a very heavy-sided, well, one side of the draw, and a perhaps more, dare I say, a lighter side on the right side of the draw. So there's lots to discuss. I thought we could go over the games that will be played, how I feel that they might go through some of the stories, and yeah, just get excited for the next stage, or for the start of the proper knockouts for the Champions League, now that the mini playoffs have been played, obviously with PSG, Galatasaray, Madrid, Atalanta, Newcastle, Atletico Bordeaux, and Leverkusen Bayer 04 coming through to match, or to join the teams that had already made the knockouts by way of coming in the top 8 in this new format of the Champions League, in its second season in this new format. And I have to say, it's exciting in the sense of, this new format is more exciting. We have more top caliber games already in the sort of new league format stage. And yeah, it makes for very interesting watching, of course. But as a football obsessed person, why wouldn't I say that? So let's go through the games, which obviously have been heavily scrutinized for being a very, well, as I mentioned, a bit sided more towards a heavier or stronger left side here. So let's go through those. We have PSG going to be playing against Chelsea. We have Galatasaray playing against Liverpool. Again, I think it's 5 seasons in a row that we have Real Madrid playing against Man City, obviously grudge match for Pep. We have Atalanta against Bayern, which is definitely not going to be an easy game. Then on the other side, we have the team I support, Barcelona, will be playing against Newcastle. And yeah, many people try to tell us just how, maybe that'll be easier than such. Trust me, as a Barca fan, I am not that confident at the moment. We have Tottenham against Atletico Madrid. We have Bordeaux against Sporting Club de Portugal. And then we have Leverkusen against Arsenal. Now, one thing that some of the more, astute eyes among you might notice is we are definitely having a few games that have already been played this season, whether it's PSG and Chelsea, who met in the final the Club World Cup, whether it's Galatasaray and Liverpool, who played in the group stages against each other, Man City and Real Madrid, who played each other, sorry, not group stages, this new league format that we have in the Premier League, or whether it's no, actually, I think, oh yeah, of course, Barcelona, Newcastle. So there are some repeat games, obviously with an added zest of emotion and intensity, given that we are now starting what is the knockout stage. And we all know that from now until the final, which I'm not sure if it's going to be played in late May instead of early June, given that it's a World Cup here. But yeah, May 30th, there it says the final. Let's go through them. All right, so obviously what we have to start and discuss is just a few things a lot of people in the football sphere have been discussing. And that is obviously how heavy-sided it is to the left side here, on this side here. Obviously PSG and Chelsea, Liverpool, Real Madrid, City, and Bayern all on one side of the draw. And if we really talk about heavyweights on this side of the draw, I think we're really looking at just Barcelona, Arsenal, and Atletico Madrid, who are having a bit of a resurgence to their season. As a Barca fan, I have to say that, does that fill me with more confidence? At the moment, no, because at this level, I feel that basically any team who makes it this far can exploit our, what I would say, perhaps more frailties in defense. However, we're going to be exploring that in a moment. Let's start on the left side. Let's start with the big crunch games, with the big games that we're all talking about, starting with Chelsea and PSG. Obviously PSG starting at home. This is a repeat of the Club World Cup final, and I'm not for those of you who watched it, have to say. Maresca showed that he was really a big sort of big game manager in that sense, and that he not only thrashed Barca a few months later, towards the end of November, but he also really thrashed PSG in the final. They outplayed PSG, who had just come from thrashing Madrid 4-0 in the semi-final of the Club World Cup. Now, of course, there's a lot of ways to analyze that. It was the first edition of that competition. We didn't really know what to expect. It was incredibly hot in the US summertime. The teams hadn't been formed. One doesn't really know if it's considered the beginning of this season or the end of the previous, or some kind of limbo in between. It's going to be taking place every 4 years. I would say that we were glad to watch such a high caliber game, but it did have elements of just feeling as a glorified friendly. However, if my team Barca had played it, there's no way I would have called it a glorified friendly. So we take it for what it was. It was a competition. It was an official competition, and it was a really well played game. Cole Palmer, absolutely stellar there, standout performance. So they have played each other sort of within this season. It's a repeat of that. It's different circumstances now. However, I think PSG are starting to find their feet after a very, I would say, rather challenging progression of their season so far. They're now starting to have a rather comfortable lead at the top of the French league, but that wasn't always the case with Lens and Marseille and a resurgent Lyon, making things perhaps more difficult for them. And now there's no Maresca, and Rosenior does actually have a rather decent statistic. I think he's played a few games against Luis Enrique's PSG, but of course, when he was at Strasbourg, obviously it's not too much to look into. However, I would say that PSG have the confidence of having gone through this before. Also last season, when they won the Champions League, they started by not making the direct top 8, but by qualifying via the playoff, and then they made that, and then they went on this incredible run from sort of February onwards. So basically what we'll be seeing is a Chelsea that under Rosenior managed to stabilize results in his first 5-6 games. However, they've lost the big games they've played, which so far has been Arsenal in the EFL Cup, where they lost the semi-final, and then also just lost to them a few days ago in the league as well, and also gotten a few draws as of late to kind of quell that sort of initial spark under Rosenior, and at the same time a terrible disciplinary record, which Chelsea will have to look into. There are doubts about Dembele's fitness. However, I can see PSG as slight favorites in this game. I also believe that Luis Enrique's experience winning this both with Barcelona and now with PSG last season, I can see them perhaps being slightly favorites in this game. However, Chelsea have I would say a wonderful history in the Champions League, or in the recent Champions League, so sort of in the last decade, 2 decades. They've been a constant fixture there. And I would say that even though PSG might be slight favorites, this will be a very interesting game. However, it feels a bit deflated with Chelsea at the moment, and a bit of frustration at not really, after having let Maresca go. Well, he kind of was asking to be let go, let's be honest. Now they'll be facing a PSG that is coming into the crunch time, that knows how to handle these games. This isn't the Chelsea from 2021. It'll be interesting, obviously, with the return leg being played in London. It could be an advantage to Chelsea, but we'll have to see. I can see that game being a very intense game. I can really feel it'll be a great game to watch. However, I would struggle to see Chelsea edging PSG here. However, stranger things have definitely happened. I think there'll be a lot of impetus on Chelsea to be able to get Caicedo, so Fernandes and Palmer to kind of control, or to at least have some kind of an effect on the game if they want to try and take some control of the game, take some impetus, as of course opposed to what I consider one of the greatest midfields in the world, which is Vitinha, João Neves. It's strange to see Marco Fabianis not having the prominence that he usually was having last year. Also with Nuno Mendes, Kvaratskhelia, and then obviously Barcola, Doué, etc. It's just difficult to see how PSG wouldn't edge this one, but Chelsea have showed in the Champions League that they are very difficult to beat. So it'll be a very intense, tight game, as most of these games will be. However, I can imagine that Luis Enrique will be slightly more confident given his experience in these stages. Moving on to Liverpool against Galatasaray. Obviously, they played each other earlier this season. Very difficult place to visit. I'm a big admirer of the fans in Turkey, of especially teams like Galatasaray and Fenerbahce, Besiktas. I think they bring a wonderful passion. I think it's very difficult to play in those games in Istanbul. There is a history, of course, with Liverpool in Istanbul with the Champions League finals, etc. They've already played each other, in which actually Liverpool had a comfortable win over Galatasaray. However, they just came from a rather interesting playoff game against Juventus, in which they, I would say, really were superior than them in the first leg, and then in the second leg, Juventus, with a very spirited performance, almost got back, until with a player less, Osimhen used his experience and his strength to score a goal that basically quelled any chances that Juventus had of a miracle comeback, right? So obviously the first game will be in Istanbul. That will be where Galatasaray will be looking to impose their game, impose their threat on a Liverpool that's had a very inconsistent season. I think many would argue a terrible season. There are many factors for that. They seem to be finding their feet just recently, also in the Premier League. There seems to be a bit of consistency building there. Obviously, their goal right now is to make the Champions League qualification for next year, and then to regroup in the summer after what started as a very difficult season for very obvious reasons. And then obviously a lot of injuries to their main signings, and a lot of big signings which haven't worked in the way that they wish they would work. So obviously Juve have showed that one has to be very careful when playing in Galatasaray's home stadium. It's a trip to Turkey. Liverpool already having beat them, and of course Liverpool, I think, are the second or third best team in with the most Champions League trophies, together with Milan and Real Madrid. This is kind of their competition. Slot also would like to probably get further than he did last year, where they lost to PSG. I can see here Liverpool being slight favorites, but Galatasaray, if you also look at their squad, it's a very stacked squad. They have really incredible players. They bring on players like Icardi from the bench for Osimhen. They have Gündogan, they have Sané, they have in midfield Torreira, and then Davinson Sanchez and other, equally, I would say, even European caliber players in their ranks. So, and it's a rather stacked squad, so it'll be very interesting. It's good to see for Liverpool that Wirtz has started to play well since the turn of the year. After, of course, with that price tag, he obviously wasn't performing, as were many players. Also, Isak obviously will be out, but they're really looking to McAllister, to Szoboszlai, to Ekitike, who's really become the talisman striker up front, to just kind of give them the impetus they'll need to edge this game. Especially they have the second leg then at home at Anfield, Magical Nights at Anfield. All I know is that this is going to be a really great game. These would be great games to watch. It would be very passionate affairs, both Liverpool and Galatasaray. I can see Liverpool being favorites for the time being. However, they have been very inconsistent this season, and had various extended runs where they didn't win or got a lot of ties. So yeah, this is obviously now just a way also for Liverpool to save their season. Moving forward to Real Madrid against Manchester City. They call this the modern classic, or the modern Clásico. I think firstly because the grudge between Pep and Real Madrid, for obvious reasons, and historical implications of that pairing. But I would also argue here that I kind of understand the frustration of both of them, that they end up playing each other. I think it was Courtois who said, or I'm not sure if it was Courtois or even Arbeloa, who said before the draw, there's going to be a draw and we're going to end up playing Man City. And then there seems to have been some friendly comments also from Pep and from City saying, we expected to to play Madrid. So obviously it's now 5 years in a row. Obviously in the 2023 season, that was when City beat them and then went on to win the treble with a very inspired Haaland and Rodri, with a Gundogan that was sort of in his last dance with City, and they won everything in 2023. However, in the last season, they met in the playoffs, and it was a very clear victory through a very inspired Mbappe. But that was also a City that was sort of in reconstruction. And City really started the season as well, kind of feeling like they might be rebuilding here a bit, yet somehow have now really found their footing. They're playing really inspired football. It's sort of like the fifth revolution of Guardiola at City. Now with Semenyo and with Gray, he's really managed to stabilize. Obviously this is Real Madrid's competition. I'm a Barcelona fan, but we all know this is Real Madrid's competition. They just came from 2 defeats in the league, away to Osasuna and then yesterday to Getafe. The players are being booed. There's no structure, there's no idea of the football that they want to play. Arbeloa, he does look out of his depth. That sort of effect of his after Xabi Alonso's dismissal seems to have evaporated rather rapidly, and they're kind of saying that the only hope for Madrid would be to have a good run in the Champions League. And if there's one club that can say that, even when they're playing as terribly as they're playing, it's Real Madrid. We have to say that. We have to admit to that. Yeah, it's a very patchy Madrid. I would see perhaps City as slight favorites, but here I wouldn't. I'm not good at predicting games. That's why you don't hear me predicting any results. I struggle very much to predict against Real Madrid in the Champions League. City really are, though, coming into form. Obviously, with the first game being in the Bernabeu, City will probably try to get a decent result, perhaps snatch a win or at least get a draw. Try not to lose that game to then bring everything to the Etihad for the second leg. They're also going for a Premier League push. They're going to be playing also in the final of the EFL Cup, which will also define a lot against Arsenal, the same Arsenal they are chasing in the Champions League. City really seem to be playing liberated from any pressure or tension, which seemed to be bogging them down a lot last year. And it seems that Haaland now has the support of Semenyo when it comes to goals. Marmoush started nicking a few. The emergence of Nico O'Reilly as a sort of attacking midfielder, left back and central midfielder is incredible. And with Guehi bringing that stability that they needed after the long-term injuries to Guardiola and Stones, Ruben Diaz just finally seems to have that kind of stable player that he can play with. Unfortunately, with Husanov, it just seemed a bit premature for Husanov. And yeah, it seems like City are finding that vertebrae again and finding some good rhythm. And at the same time, the Ballon d'Or winner of 2024, Rodri, is now getting his game time starting to be decisive again. And City are starting to also win games by tight margins. And they're showing that kind of nous that you need to win these. They have the experience and they're starting to show it. There are doubts about Mbappe, who's just traveled to France. He's got a problem with his knee for the last couple months. He's kind of been playing through the pain, getting incredible statistics, but unfortunately it seems as though he might not be ready to play this game. And obviously that might liberate Vinny a bit more, because we've seen that there's a real struggle when Mbappe and Vinny play together, especially in the high profile matches. Vinicius has been playing some wonderful football. He's one of the few who's really going for everything and really showing that spirit. However, it is tough. The one thing is that the City is still in all competitions. Madrid might focus a bit more on this game, but the mood in Madrid right now is very bleak. There was even shouts against Florentino for him to step down, boos against the team, and against Getafe yesterday when they were 1-0 down, and I have to say they barely got a chance at goal. The stadium was starting to get half empty by the 85th minute, so it'll be a very interesting game. However, I wouldn't know how to call this one. Then we have Atalanta against Bayern. Here, I strongly see Bayern as favorites. Atalanta are a really exciting team, obviously with Scamacca, with De Ketelere, with De Roon, with his experience in central midfield, with Jim City in the back, and Scalvini and Carnesecchi in goal, a goalkeeper I very much like, and Ederson in midfield. They're a very exciting team. It's very tough to play them in their stadium in Bergamo. I just think Bayern are just showing under Kompany an incredible how should I say, resilience and ability to do exactly that which Bayern always does, which basically the kind of Real Madrid-esque aspect to them. Obviously, with the second game being in the Allianz Arena, I can't see any other way than Bayern edging this one. It won't be as easy for Atalanta as it was perhaps against Dortmund. Not saying it was easy, but against Bayern, they will see themselves as underdogs, but I think they might just relish that as well. It's a very difficult place to go. They're incredibly high press, and they play a football under Palladino, which is perhaps, I would say, a little bit more reserved than that which Gasperini, which we saw those years. It'll be a very interesting game, but Bayern with the good results they've been getting lately, just recently beating Dortmund in the last minute in the Dortmund stadium. It just kind of shows that Bayern are basically very consistent. They might be a bit discouraged by having lost to Arsenal earlier in the season in the Champions League, but right now Bayern are really strong favorites to win this whole Champions League. They've really found what I would say is a cultural fit as well with Kompany. He's really gelled with the players, and also he's just carrying himself in a way that I really respect and that I would really align with if I were a Bayern fan. And after the disasters post-Flick, which would be with Tuchel and Nagelsmann, even though they won a few trophies, they now have a manager they can get behind. Then we get to Arsenal against Leverkusen. Here I see Arsenal as strong favorites. However, here the question will be, will Arsenal, obviously their focus is just on finally winning the Premier League the first time since 2004. They're in the best position to do that. However, we do know that they have they do have City breathing down their necks. Their squad depth is really incredible, so I think they'll be trying to use that. I can't see Leverkusen, who under Kasper Hjulmand, who was obviously the Danish success coach for the national team over the last decade or so. He's now taken over after Erik ten Hag's dismissal after 2 games of the season. I would say that even though Leverkusen has exciting players, I don't see them edging past Arsenal here. Although again, stranger things have happened. The impetus here will be on Arsenal to get a decent result in Leverkusen and to then bring it home in the second leg. Then with Bodo and Sporting Clube de Portugal, honestly here it's just incredibly exciting. It's really cool that these two teams, obviously Sporting is a staple of European top European football and from the Portuguese league. They're showing that they're not just here as passengers. Also Bodo, as we all like to say it, football in the Arctic Circle. They play some incredible football. The way they thrashed Man City in their home stadium, the way that they took the game to Inter, beating Inter twice, it was just incredible. It was just great to see them. They play really inspired football with Hauge, who's on fine form. I can perhaps see Bodo snatching, winning this one, and perhaps making it to the next round. I can definitely see that happening. However, Sporting is also in a fine moment of form, and here it'll be very interesting to see Campbell to really keep their dark horse, the dark horse momentum going. And I don't even see it as dark horse anymore. When you see how they played and the teams they've beaten and the confidence in which they do it and the forward-thinking, progressive football they play, I wouldn't even call them dark horses anymore. Then we have Atletico Madrid against Tottenham. So basically, Simeone is starting to find form. Also, Sorloth is starting to play really well, given that Julian Alvarez had a spell of like 10 games or many months without a goal, which is surprising. Also, the addition of Lookman is just great. It's such an astute signing. It's working so well. I think Atletico is also really galvanized after having beaten Barcelona 4-0, obviously, at the time of recording in a few hours. It's the return leg of that game. Tottenham in total institutional crisis after Daniel Levy left after 25 years. Who's leading them now with Igor Tudor as coach? He's lost the first 2 games in the Premier League. The first game he lost was none other than the North London derby at home. He lost 4-1, and now having lost the game to Fulham, they are just 5 points above the relegation zone, with 1 or 2 teams underneath them picking up points in the last months. These next 10 games in the Premier League will be really interesting for them. I don't think Tottenham will go down if it would be one of the biggest stories in modern football. However, I don't see them getting past Atletico. However, player for player, We know that Tottenham is the most injury blighted team, probably in the top leagues right now. It's incredible. But they do have a really strong squad, I have to say. If we look that they have Cristian Romero, one of the top Argentinian defenders, Miki van de Ven in the back, Colomwani up front, Xavi Simons behind them. Obviously, these are players that can make a difference. However, it's just not proving to be this season. They look disjointed. They went from a more defensive approach with Thomas Frank to now an attacking approach. Yeah, it's an institutional crisis. I see Atletico will edge this one. They will probably have a very strong and Simeone-inspired first leg in the Metropolitano. But it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And then lastly, we have Barcelona-Newcastle. Obviously, the result, the first Champions League game of Barca's season, or our season, was against Newcastle, and we won 2-1. Those two magnificent goals, the header and the long shot, powered shot by Rashford. Against Newcastle. Obviously, the impetus will be on Barcelona to see themselves as favorite here, as many people are saying. Newcastle with a very weak league form and incredibly inconsistent. I would say it's the first time in Eddie Howe's reign at Newcastle where one might be questioning, is he fully happy to stay on under these terms? Obviously, they haven't been able to invest the way they wanted because of the FFP and the sustainability rules after the Saudi takeover. However, I think on any given day, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be difficult for Barca's defense if they keep allowing the amount of danger to keep approaching and encroaching our half every game. It's really a risky game. Anthony Gordon can be like an arrow piercing Barca's misaligned back line. That is, if Barca have games like they had against Real Sociedad, or if the kind of games we had in the Champions League where we lost to Chelsea, or the ones that we perhaps have been having in the league as well, but we won simply because of the quality in our ranks. As we say with Flick's Barca, we outscore teams. However, when we don't score, we do concede. So we score an average of 3 to 4 goals a game, but we also concede an average to 1 to 2 goals a game. And it'll just be very interesting to see how that goes. So, and St. James's Park under the floodlights, perhaps the last big game of Newcastle's season. You never know what might happen, and Barca has to be careful if they were to concede, not to concede more. Obviously, some might say I sound a bit negative. I'm just very wary of Barca's high line. However, with Pedri coming back, it's really exciting. Rafinha now finally in full form, and Lamine in the greatest form I think that I've ever seen him since, basically since a year ago. Obviously, he was playing with the pain in his pelvis. He seems to now say that he's playing freely. He wasn't playing happy, he said. We really felt that as well. Unfortunately, De Jong is out for these games, and Christensen, who obviously is a long-term injury. It'll be interesting to see how Barcelona perform. However, I would expect Barcelona to edge Newcastle over 2 games with the return leg being in the Camp Nou. However, without an important part of the stadium having been given the permission to add another 14 or 15,000 seats behind the goal on the left side of the screen. So yeah, let's see how that goes. So I think it's very exciting. I think right now we all know the favorites, sort of, I would say PSG, probably Bayern and Arsenal. Those are kind of the 3 clear favorites, and then I'd have Barca and perhaps I would say Barca, Man City, Real Madrid in that sort of, up there as well. It's obviously anyone's guess at this point. Yeah, let me know how you think it's going to go, and yeah, share your love for the game. Thanks for tuning in.